In one of the fastest growing cities in the world, a love affair is blooming. Melbourne's residents are talking to their trees. A conversation is unfurling.
Dear 1517, I am confessing something very dear to me. I have fallen in love with 1583. Should I leave? Or should I stay? It would be great if you could give me some advice.
Around the world, more people are living in cities than ever before.
How's it going, 1517? I've been wondering, what's the city like for you?
If we change our perspective, we can see that trees are nature's great connectors. When trees breathe, so do we. Each breath cleaning the air and restoring balance. Our past, present and future are intertwined with trees, yet we have lost the ability to see them. To thrive, we must fall in love again with our city's trees and nurture our urban forests.
Hello, 1517. We don't have a lot in common, you being a tree and all. I'm glad we're in this together. Regards, a tree lover.
Hello, tree. It's your mother. How come you never call?
Hey, can you believe it's been a year since we revealed the first look at Unreal Engine 5? We went behind the scenes of Lumen in the land of Nanite to discover the inspiration for those special features, and now we're thrilled to put them in your hands. Unreal Engine 5 Early Access is now available. This build is for you game devs out there who like to live on the bleeding edge so you can start experimenting with our latest features, including Lumen, Nanite, World Partition, Metasounds, and more. Keep in mind that UE5 Early Access is not production ready, but you can download the latest build and the Valley of the Ancient sample project featured during our YouTube premiere. Get all the details on UE5 Early Access from the feed and share your feedback with us in the forums. When you take a break from giving UE5 a test drive, be sure to pop over to the Unreal Engine Marketplace to download 2 new realistic automotive scenes for free. In addition to an expansive Salt Flats area, the Automotive Salt Flats project features customizable mountain ranges and special atmospherics. Or get away from the sun in the Automotive Winter scene with customizable levels of snow, dirt, or wetness on a winding country road. And if you're looking for something else, thousands of Marketplace products are now on sale at up to 70% off during the Unreal Engine Massive Marketplace Sale, arguably our biggest sale yet. Find discounts on everything from explosive sound collections, modular castles, materials, plugins, to the entire Earth. Sale runs now through Saturday, June 5th. Ever thought about quitting your day job to build a game? Solo developer and father of 3 Jonas Monka shares what it was like to do just that. He's now working full-time on Omno, a single-player journey of discovery through an ancient world of wonders. Hear more about the epic Mega Grant recipient's journey from hobbyist to full-time studio founder and developer. When AV Simulation set out to improve Scanner, their all-purpose automotive simulator software, they chose to convert it to an Unreal Engine platform. Learn more about how that shift enabled them to improve the software's flexibility, modularity, and realism while also providing customers with a slew of new options. And now over to this week's top Karma earners. Mindsurfer Dev, Every Nun, Clockwork Ocean, Shadow River, Fraps 2020, Renee Zwan, W2LF, Kahel18, Static Void LOL, and Crew Dimer. Thank you all so much. To open up our community spotlights, put your hands in the air for the Vismo team behind this rockin' virtual concert. They're so excited to finally be able to share it, so be sure to head over to the forums and let them know what you think. Next up is a mammoth display by Alessandro Mastronardi, complete with dynamic fur and UE 426. They plan to create a short film with it in the future, so stay tuned to their ArtStation page for updates. And last up this week is Kainga, an ancient village builder in development by solo dev Eric Rempen. Adapt to survive against changing weather, lurking beasts, and competitive tribes as your culture and technology evolve. Wishlist Kainga on Steam. Thanks for watching this week's News and Community Spotlight.
Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside Unreal, a weekly show where we learn, explore, and celebrate everything Unreal. I'm your host, Victor Broden, and to help me with the episodes that we have coming for you in the next couple of weeks, I'd like to introduce, once again on the show, Chance Ivy.
Hey everyone, so good to see you. It's been a while. I missed you. I'm glad to be back. I'm glad to talk about UE5.
And we're not alone, though. It's not just me and Chance, even though we will be on the stream for the next couple of weeks. And for today, we'd like to welcome you to Unreal Engine 5 Early Access. And to help us with this, we've invited Michal Valiant, Engineering Director for Graphics.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Nick Pemwarden, VP of Engineering.
Hey, happy to be here. It's been a while since I've been on the stream, so excited.
It's good to have you, Nick. Nick Whiting, Technical Director.
Hey, been a while for me too, but happy to be back.
And last but not least, Simon Taranjo, Engineering Director of Tools.
Everyone.
Great. To kick off, I'd like to, start with a little bit of Pretty Pixels. And so let's roll the short of what we did yesterday. Exciting. We hope that you all had the opportunity to at least start the download of Valley of the Ancient and get UE5 loaded on your computers. It is available through the launcher. You can go to the UE5 tab. Everyone should be seeing it by now. If you don't, just go ahead and make sure you restart the launcher. Yesterday was an exciting day for all of us. We're finally able to talk about all of the things that we've been working on since we announced UE5 earlier last year. And I would like to kick it off with Nick Pemward and talk a little bit about what we've been up to since the announcement last year.
Yeah, sure. So the reveal last summer was a really early look at some of the technologies that we were developing for Unreal Engine 5, and so since then we've had a focus on getting those features closer to maturity, working on optimizations, working on getting them ready to be used in a number of different situations and scenarios. And then in addition to what we showed last year, we've been working on numerous other features that we're really excited about for UE5. But between the two of those, that's kept us really busy for the last year, and I'm really excited to get to share all that work with early access coming out.
Well, that's awesome. And yeah, so I remember Nick sometime last summer chatting with you and Kim and a bunch of the other engineering folks about kind of the lead up to early access and kind of talking about when we're going to release in 2021 and what that's going to look like. Can you kind of give us a little bit of an overview of what early access is like to Epic, right? Like what do we have in there? Kind of what was our focus for kind of defining the feature set that's going to be in there, and what do we kind of want developers to get from it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess first and foremost, early access is the first look that developers are going to get in terms of getting their hands on UE5 and playing with it. And so, it's the opportunity to see what you all do with the technology, and then take your feedback, see what's working well, what's not, and incorporating that feedback into the ongoing development of Unreal 5. In terms of feature set, I mentioned that we've been working on a lot of other features outside of what we showed last year with Lumen in the Land of Nanite, and so it was pulling together all of those streams of development together into a cohesive whole. So Nanite and Lumen, I think everybody remembers those from our demo last year, but then in sort of bringing that together with the world partition system that we've been building for building and editing large worlds, for streaming large worlds. We've last year we showed a preview of some of the new animation technologies that were going in, and those have really evolved over the last year. And in the video you got to see in depth a bit more how those have evolved and advanced over time. And then some exciting features that we didn't talk too much about last year, I think, like meta sounds and the future of audio in Unreal. Some of the developer workflow improvements that we've been working on, right? So game feature plugins and how to enable the writing of good modular gameplay code and gameplay features. As well as, of course, I haven't mentioned the new editor UI, but we've been iterating and working on that for a while, trying to really focus on the developer experience. And there's a couple behind the scenes things that I'm glad a lot of people have noticed. Things like the asynchronous building of textures and meshes so that you can get into the editor more quickly. Trying to make sure we're blocking the editor as little as possible, so keeping that editing experience smooth. Those have all been focuses for us over the last year, and yeah, early access is really pulling all those strings together and culminating in a still early look at UE5, but an early look that is more encompassing of the feature set that we are planning on shipping.
No, it's great. It's been a big pleasure working on a number of different systems that use a lot of these features, right? As we have kind of gotten ready to move into early access. One thing I noticed when working on Valley of the Ancient, specifically for this launch, was how at home I felt in UE5 versus UE4. I came from the UE3 world into UE4, and there's a lot of conventions that kind of stayed the same right between the two, but the tooling was advanced enough between for that generation jump that I had to relearn a handful of things, which is good and exciting. A lot of us internally working on this tool and working on this demo, one thing I noticed was how easy it was just to kind of pick up and apply a lot of knowledge I already know. That it's not just that a lot of the core frameworks are the same there, but even with the editor UI, I mean, so much is just it operates mostly the same. It's just simpler, more streamlined, and it's kind of out of my way.
That actually reminds me of another aspect of UE5 development that haven't really touched on yet. But one of the guiding principles we had with going into UE5 was making sure that developers could bring their projects and their content from UE4 into UE5, and trying to make that as frictionless as possible. And so that was always something that was on our minds over the last year. We want to make some pretty big changes to the engine, both new features, but also some of the systems under the hood. and making sure that we do that in a way that we can preserve the ability to take a UE4 project and bring it into to UE5 with as little effort. And one of the things I've been really happy to see over the last day as people are starting to download and explore UE5 is that a lot of people are reporting back that they've been able to take the game that they're working on and migrate it into UE5. And sometimes there's a little bit of fix-up in game code, but by and large, maps, assets are all loading, and with some minor changes for a couple of compatibility breaks, it sounds like people are having a pretty good experience bringing their UE4 content into UE5. And that's really important to me because it means that developers are going to be able to make that jump from 4 to 5, and not have it be as a big impact to development.
Yeah, I remember early on, I was talking with, I think maybe you and Mike Fricker, and Mike's like, we need to build a list of things that we know is okay to kind of deprecate a little bit and find the appropriate way to make sure that people don't run into too much pain when they do that. And it was like this really regimented thing where it was going kind of system by system to make sure we understood what the impact for those things were, just so people aren't blindsided by any of this. And I think that turned into a doc we have that kind of shows, hey, here's some of the things that you might see that are fundamentally different as we move forward.
Yep.
So one thing we did too, and Nick, I talked with you and Nick Whiting early on. I guess I can say early on. It's been like a year, but about when we're talking about early access, and that was the drive to push like out a sample project, right, for a number of different reasons there. And so what we had ended up kind of deciding was like we knew we want to kind of see what we can do with early access at that state, right? Like we knew kind of the feature set that we had a good amount of confidence that was going to land. We talked with this group here and then numerous other dev leads to kind of knock down the specifics of, hey, these things we feel there's a certain level of the confidence that we're going to be able to land in the time frame to the level that we want people to actually go and try them and give us feedback on. Right? There's going to be other things that are in early access that are it's like a little bit more experimental than what we have there, but it was really exciting to kind of to hit the books and kind of think through what that might look like. So, Nick, I think what was that, Whiting? I think that was October when we started the conversation on Valley.
Yeah, October is when we kind of started ideating on what should we do, what can we do. Like you said, it was important to find the features that not only could we ship a project with, but that we would feel confident people could actually crack it open and mess around with and explore a little bit on their own.
Yeah, it was crazy because we had a bunch of different kind of efforts going on at the time with a bunch of the talented folks at Epic. The Quixel team was kind of thinking about what they want to do for early access and kind of how they can show off a lot of their assets using Lumen and Nanite and try to solve some of those problems. We were working with Aaron Sims Creative already on kind of thinking through some of the next gen animation tech things, and we were like, let's get together and assemble a project with these folks. And like, it's funny, we talked back to we looked back at a lot of other demos that we've done around some of these releases, and it was kind of important to us, I think, across the board, that we didn't want to build something that kind of tried all these things out and could show what was possible without giving it to folks too. So it was kind of from the get-go a new lens to kind of look through building this project that we wanted to do. So so we decided to just find the way that we could provide some really nice, clean examples for all of the features that you called out in the video and more. There's quite a bit more in there that we'll be covering later on. But we wanted to show specifically how far we could push some of these things for today. And so that's kind of how we ended up with the big landscape. Try to take things to the limit, fail a lot, figure it out, understand how the tools work, right? And Mikhail is kind of laughing over there because we went back and forth a lot on specifically how do we take Nanite to scale and not paint ourselves into some weird corners. And we learned so much in the process. It's been really exciting. And then also too, it let us kind of really walk through, gave us a goal to get something out so we can harden some of that, the tech that we knew we had there. The engineers, the dev leads were, really excited to get involved and have somebody using their tech day by day and embedding with a content team to actually build something. And so So it's really cool to do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say it was really a good opportunity for us to experiment with using some of these new features ourselves. Again, pulling those different strings of development together and making sure that they all work together harmoniously, and then letting us experiment with, as you say, pushing the tech to its limit. So what happens when we try to build a 4-kilometer squared area entirely out of nanite meshes? Like what does that look like? What are the workflow challenges? What are the what are the ways we can optimize those systems in the engine and really hone in and improve those workflows? And so it was a really good learning opportunity for us, because this is all new, revolutionary tech in a lot of ways, and so we are learning on the fly the best way to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I think we'll have on a later live stream. We've got Brian Karras to come on and talk, and I
Next
think we
week.
we have Galen on too, so we can talk artist versus engineer on like letting somebody just go nuts, like just go free with building a nanite environment, just hand place everything and see what happens, and then tell us how we're going wrong and finding the right middle ground there. And so there's a lot of really cool learnings there. Another thing too, I think is interesting, and I think this happens every time we go to release something. The conversations we had back in the fall about, hey, what's going to be ready? What do we think is going to be ready for early access, and what do we want to commit to? That list kind of like the tools got better and they got more robust, but also we were able to add more stuff because people were really excited about seeing people touch and feel their tools for a while, and they were able to just add to more and like kind of commit to more as we go. And so it just turned into a really rich early access experience, even though it's still super early days. There's really a lot to get in there and poke around with.
All right, we're definitely getting a lot of questions here. I'd like to let everyone know that we are going to do Q&A. We just want to make sure that we go through everything that we'd like to talk about. Chance already mentioned this, but go ahead and check out the schedule on the Twitch About page for what we are covering in the next couple of weeks. If you're curious, Nanite, Lumen, World Partition, we're doing a deep dive on all of the new animation features. And so if you are specifically looking for some of answers to those questions, we will be covering all of those in detail. But I think we should definitely talk a little bit about Valley of the Ancient, which we all have a difficult time not saying the code name for here. So we're going to do our very best to refer to it for what you all know it as. Chance, would you like to show a little bit of Pretty Pixel for us?
Yeah, sure. I'll pop over real quick. I've got the project open here. We might not be going too much into it in detail here, and I'm sure you've seen the video specifically. But as mentioned, we've got what is built out here is it's roughly it's a much bigger than a 2x2 environment. You can see here in our world partition mini map. The actual space that's I think 2x2 is roughly, if I use my little kilometer thing there, it's about these 25 cells in that space. But we've got a bunch of items here in the distance that you can see when you're lower, they're just always loaded. It's a hand-built map. It was done in just about, I think, 10 to 12 weeks by a handful of Quixel artists using our open world tools, which we'll get to in a second, and we'll have Simon talk to them a little bit. It kind of, we wanted to kind of see how far we could go with Nanite in an environment, and using some of the world partition streaming. I mean, we could go way larger than what we had here. We just were working within, some time constraints that kept us focused just kind of in a specific area that we knew we could get to a certain level of quality and density and time. It stars our character Echo from Reverb. It's not necessarily an extension. I said Reverb. There we go. It's the first one. Lumen and the Land of Nanite. Oh, it was the demo from last summer. We have code names around here. So we have Echo here at a campfire, and she can use her remote to kind of explore the space and kind of get into all the hyper resolution geometry as we go. We have the data layer system. Real quick, going to pop these over. This might take a couple of seconds to load since there's just a ton of content in there, and I haven't loaded on this box quite yet. So let me get over to this one.
Chance, what hardware are you running the demo on?
This one right here is, let me get back down to where we were. this is this is a 3080 on this machine here. This is one of the ones that we use to record early on. But most everybody that worked on the project was anywhere from 1080 to 2080 for the most part as we built the entire demo. So we use the other features inside the new open world tools to switch over into kind of this dark world reimagination. And then we end up fighting a big, ancient robot held together with magic, is what I say, since he's built with a bunch of pieces of nanite, geometry that are all kind of intertwined and everything. And so it's pretty cool. It shows off all the features that we'll be talking about here. In brief detail, or sorry, at some level of depth, and then we'll go super deep on all of them as we move on throughout the rest of the live streams.
We had some. I just realized that we don't have a representative here today, but we will in the upcoming weeks. But Quixel played a big role in the demo, right. And we're seeing I think almost not all of it, but a lot of the environment assets are megascans, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah, the team went out to Moab actually back in the fall, and they used some new drone scanning techniques where they fly a drone up and they're able to scan massive cliff faces, and then take all that scan data on all those pictures and composite them together to make super high resolution geometry. And there's a new asset type that they built that's basically it's a combination of those things, almost like a prefabricated a collection of those meshes that can be easily used in the scene. And that's, if you've seen the video, it's outlined pretty well there. It's pretty awesome. The team is using some spline tools to kind of be able to dress up cliff sides, and things like that, using some utilities and Blueprint, and really, really quickly build out a lot of the scene.
Cool. All right. I think let's go ahead and dive into. So we will be diving into Topaz in detail in the coming weeks, especially in regards to Nanite stream next week. Galen Davis will be showing off sort of how Nanite was worked with, the workflows, the implementations, the stuff we learned, all of that. But to move on, I would like to ask Simon a little bit about, we have a new user interface, which is probably the first thing that folks see when they download UE5 and open it up. Would you like to talk to us a little bit about it?
Sure. Yeah, so for UE5, we really wanted to simplify the interface and make it not overwhelming for new users, but still being empowering for advanced users. So as Chance said, transitioning from UE4 to UE5 is pretty easy on the UI front. You won't need to relearn the tools. You might look for some of the things, but it's not major changes. We wanted to make the viewport really a first-class citizen, as over the years, it seems like the viewport got smaller and smaller. So now the content browser, is in a drawer that can be pushed down. You can collapse panels into to sidebar tabs, so you get more of the nice pixels in the viewport. Now we have a dark theme for the editor, and you can customize it. You can make your own theme if you want, change the colors and all. In the future, we'll probably offer a light theme also. Yeah, and in the future, we also want to simplify some workflows so that you can modify properties without having to go into details panel, like changing light parameters and things like that. But it's not in early access yet, but will be for 5.0. So hopefully you'll like the new UI.
Yeah, on the new UI and working on Topaz, one thing I noticed that wasn't called out specifically to me when I first saw the content browser drawer, I was like, this is great, because I need it all the time, but I don't need it in my face all the time because I don't do a whole lot of set dressing, but I need to get access to a thing. The drawer is available in pretty much every other window too, right? So if I'm in a Blueprint, I need access to a file on disk, whether it be like in a public field, or if I'm trying to spawn something, I can pop up in the content browser drawer, find the thing I need and drag it into space, or just reference it directly from there. It's super nice. I've learned to use that pretty much everywhere I go. If I've got a multi-monitor setup, I might, depending on what I'm doing, I might pop it out and set it somewhere, but yeah, for this project, almost always I left it in a drawer and just grabbed it when I needed it, and it was great.
And the drawer is not finished yet. No promises here, but I did hear from some of the developers that they're working on the possibility of adding more tabs to it, so that you can say because it was one of the biggest requests, right? Being able to add the output log, and so that you can just pop that open and look at it as you're playing in viewport. Exciting stuff. And it's control spacebar for those of you who haven't found it yet. Should probably be one of the easiest keybinds that you might accidentally touch even. Someone did tell me that that's what happened. Simon, were there any other details on the UI that you were interested in covering, or should we move on?
I think we can move on. We have lots of stuff to go over.
Yeah,
sure do.
And one more thing I will say about it, since this other question come up online, you can set it up the viewport the same as you had in UE4 if you prefer that. Nothing there is enforced. I think the intent was to make sure that you can kind of customize it in the way that best fits your workflow needs.
There's that dock in layout, I believe, is what the button's called, on the right side of the content drawer. New flashy features, Lumen and Nanite. Michal, you have been the director for the development of these features. I don't know, where do we start?
Oh, it's, tough to bring something new because we've been talking about these for quite a while. I think one part that I liked about the demo is how it's shown that with these new technologies, actually they allow you to get to this level of quality with fewer people in a short amount of time. If you think about how polished it is and how much detail we were able to get in, I don't think it was, obviously Nanite enables a lot of more detail, but just the flow and ability to create this with small group of people in the time given, it's amazing. It's pretty revealing, I think, for what is achievable with the new workflows. When it comes to Nanite, we already talked about it a bit. It's our new micro polygon renderer. It's a combination of software rasterization, hardware rasterization, and basically it does allow you to let loose a bit more when it comes to, significantly more when it comes to the limits. You can use a ton of instances, a ton more polygons. Basically, throw it at screen. It will work roughly at a constant rate. There are some scale, some performance scalings that obviously we can run into, but you don't have to worry about LODs. You could just take your cinematic model from your DCC tool, put it into Unreal, and go. You have it on screen. It runs at performance. We have still a lot of, it looks very polished. It looks great, but we still have a lot of work to do here. Right now, we're working with, opaque and rigid meshes. We have plans to add skinning in the future, to add translucencies. That's something that's not in the early access build yet. So yeah, that's it's one of these enabling features that will and are changing the way people are making content. Lumen is, I've seen some great images people creating with Lumen, like the day early access was released. I've seen awesome images. It seems like this is one of these very accessible tools. It's a true GI, so you take your scene, disable light maps, put this on, turn on the lights, start to play with emissive materials. It's great. Everything reacts to it. Time of the day actually suddenly looks so much greater because Lumen reacts to it. I think the great thing we're doing here is how widely accessible Lumen is in terms of hardware. You don't really need to have ray tracing hardware to run Lumen. It's great. It supports it, and we are still working on improving it. But we have the whole software tracing solution for the hardware that doesn't want to use hardware ray tracing, or for the titles that make the choice. That's actually working just as well, and that's what we used in the demo. It's a mix of screen space and world space tracing. So to keep things smart, we try to gather as much information from screen already as possible, and then we add even more detail from our world space Lumen structures. Another thing I think we didn't give too much attention yet is our new temporal super resolution technique. So it's a next step in our temporal anti-aliasing that's been available in Unreal for a while. It's great. It basically, I mean, there's a lot of magic behind it, but it basically allows you to render almost true 4K image at the cost of 1080p. It's very easy for people to try. If you just download Unreal, download the demo, you can turn it on and off, and you can see how the frame rate actually changes and how small a difference in quality is. And we're still working on this feature. I'm pretty sure it's going to go even better. Yeah, and I shouldn't forget actually, groom and hair. It's not completely new feature, but I think it's shown prominently with Echo this time around. It uses our custom rendering pipeline to actually be able to render individual strands of hair. There is several dozens of thousands strands attached to Echo's head, and we render it with a custom technique. It's properly lit. It's we have voxelized techniques. We use voxelization there to make sure that shadows work really well. It's fully integrated with our virtual shadow maps. So a lot of improvements went here. Integrates with volumetric cloud lighting. We reduced the footprint here, and the performance is greater than it was before. So we are moving much forward with this technique. I mentioned virtual shadow maps. I don't think I gave them credit before. It is one of the key techniques actually that shows off the nanite. It might sound a bit counterintuitive, but the amount of shadow detail we are able to get with the virtual shadow maps do bring up all the fine geometry detail coming from the Quixel megascans and rendered to nanite. It's sort of a sibling to the nanite in terms of enabling all this detail on screen. That's about it.
We're getting a couple of questions in regards to what nanite can currently and will support. One of the main ones being foliage. Folks are applying it to sort of tree assets. Could you go into just a little bit of detail there of where nanite currently is, and in regards to what it supports right now and what we might see in the future?
Okay, so nanite currently supports opaque and rigid geometry. That means what you've seen in the demo. Actually, even the ancient was nanite, even though it's moving, but it's all rigid parts, so it allows to be rendered this way. We will be adding in the future skinning support. We want to add translucencies. That's what basically you would need for foliage animation and translucencies, and also we have some ideas and some research ahead of us on how to render foliage with nanite, because it's less about what nanite allows, the amount of performance, the amount of polygons you do, but with foliage you need to think about how to reduce the geometric complexity as a tree or a bush moves further away from the screen. So that's again something, some bit of an R&D we want to do in the future to enable. Currently, you can take a tree, make it opaque mesh, so you can model the leaves as polygons, and it will render. It might just not look entirely correct as the tree goes further away from the camera, because we don't do all the right calculations considering the sparse nature of how tree looks.
Thank you, Michal. For those of you interested in more details in nanite, I'm going to keep repeating this, but I do want to let everyone know that we will be covering nanite in detail next week on the stream. And if you go ahead and look at the Twitch About page, you can see the full schedule for the next almost 2 months of UEFI-related live streams. And I'm sure there will be more coming later in the year. Let's move on to our large world tools. They involve quite a few new tools and features and workflows in Engine. Simon, would you like to go ahead and talk a little bit about it?
Yes. I'm pretty happy that we finally have world partition out in the world. We've been working on this for a few years at least with a fairly large team. Um, the reason why we wanted to work world partition was to greatly simplify workflows for large worlds. Like if you think about building a massive world, it means you probably have lots of artists and they all want to work collaboratively and be as efficient as possible. And the way Unreal was set up in Unreal 4, all the actors were in a were stored were stored in level files, and it brought contention where if you want to move an actor, you have to check out level. Level's already checked out. You're blocked. So with world partition and one file per actor on the editor side, we split the actors down to file level. So each actor is its own file. And what world partition does is that it handles dividing the whole world into a bunch of editing cells that you can decide to load or not load to work into your big world. So instead of loading a 4 by 4 kilometer world that's going to take a long time to load just to work in a small corner of the map, you can just load that corner directly, that cell, and probably load 100 times faster than you would have if you loaded everything. In some cases, you can't even load the full world because it's just too massive. So world partition becomes critical. The other aspect, let me get back up a bit. Before that, to handle the contention, what people would do was split the data into multiple sublevels. So if you want to have a level artist working and you have to have lighting artists working and sound, you would split that in sublevels, and then you won't have contention problems. But this brought data management problems where you have to think about splitting everything. You have to think, okay, I'm going to have 4 artists. I'm going to have 4 sublevels, and then if you move actors between sublevels, it adds complexity. And since the sublevels are also used for streaming, you can end up in cases where, whoops, the actor is now in the wrong level and streamed at the wrong time. So it just becomes complicated. And we really wanted to make it easy so it just works. So you just place your actor, place your stuff, do your gameplay, and it's gonna just gonna work without thinking about splitting data. On the runtime side, what world partition brings is, again, no need to worry about sublevels. No need to worry about, okay, I'm going to load that part of the world, and then when I move to that area, I'm going to load the second part and unload the previous part, and then I have to worry about memory budgets and all that. So world partition, when cooking the data, it splits the world automatically on a grid and creates basically mini sublevels for each cell. And then we use a streaming radius around the character or around any point of interest that you would want to use to stream the necessary cells as you move. So as you move through the map, it's loading the cells in front of you, unloading the cells behind. It's managing the HLODs. It just makes life much more easier. And then you can customize. You can change the size of the runtime cells if you want, depending on the density of your world. And for very advanced users, when closing and shipping a game, you could, if you want, create multiple grids, having a coarser grid for the buildings and such, and a fine grain grid for details and rubbish and things like that, that you would want to have different streaming policy, different streaming radius. Yeah, what else for world partition? Yeah, with world partition now, world composition is deprecated. And if you have a game that already uses world composition, we have a commandlet that can be used to convert automatically. It does most of the job for every world composition levels that were distance based. If you add some logic to handle the streaming, then there's a little bit of tweaking to do, but it's not too bad. And last point to note, world partition is not enabled by default. So if you create a new project, it won't be world partition. You need to go in project settings, enable world partition. And then if you create a new level, it will be automatically a world partition level. Make sure to read the documentation. It's a little bit different working in that system. You need to figure out how to load the cells and all. But once you understand the basics, it's pretty simple. Maybe last point for the one file per actor, we've also greatly improved our source control integration so that when you get to submit, you see all the actors that you modified. Previously, you would just submit a whole level blindly, not really knowing what was changed in there. So now you see that, oh, I touched this light, I touched this actor. I should not have touched this actor, I won't submit it. And then you can manage directly from the editor your change list and then submit it from there. So
Thanks, Simon. One of the questions we received in regards to world partition came from Alea, but a few others voiced it. What is the state of multiplayer support for world partition?
Yes, for multiplayer, there's a few things. Let me check my notes. Yeah, so there's a few things that were not fixed in time for early access. So if you play around with data layers, it will not be replicated. On the server, currently HLODs are getting loaded, so there's going to be, well, that's probably going to be fixed in the future release. And replay on the server also doesn't work. But other than that, yeah, it works.
And that's just for early access, right? There's teams working
Yes.
on. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, we already fixed most of those, but we just missed the cutoff.
Yeah. So that's great. These tools have been really like game changing for us and working on Valley of the Ancient, not the code name. We were able to, I think, as Simon said, there's a little bit of change in thought around how we build. You know, similar to Lumen and Nanite, some of the more traditional methods of just building games or whatever are kind of, you have to rethink them a little bit. But once we got the teams up and running, which is like within like a handful of days of us just talking through how it's going to work. I mean, we had like a dozen people, a dozen artists from the Quixel side and from the Aaron Sims and the content side on the engine team, kind of like putting things in the world all the time, like all day, every day. And we worked around the world too. I mean, we had people in, I can't remember how many countries working on the project. And no one had to, oh, I have the map and I have to give it to you, unless it was like a blueprint thing that we had to handle. And that's, completely separate from a number of the things we were talking about. And we would just sync and then just more and more and more stuff showing up in the map all the time. I don't think in the time frame that we had that we could have really built it, that way. I mean, I can't remember how many. I think there's like something like 2 million mesh instances in the Moab, scene, right? And there's like a ton in the Dark World scene. We were able to have people kind of work in the same virtual space next to each other. We'll probably talk about it in the live stream. I think we have Jean-Francois and myself later on. But the Quixel team actually in the world, because you don't have a sub-level that you're checking out, they put like these big like white planes that says like, okay, I'm working up to this white plane, so don't worry about going past that point, and I remember Whiting is like, what's with the planes? Is this like some debug thing? And it's like, yeah, it's their bookmarks to kind of say this is where I'm working to. And everybody could just go crazy. The one power per actor support is really, really, really something special with that. Being able to see exactly what you changed, why you changed it, is really awesome. I can't tell you how many times I've worked on a project where the map file's dirty, and I don't know if I did it, and so I don't know if I'm losing a change that I need, but I don't think I did it, And I'm a designer, I'm like a gameplay person putting stuff down. And I'm just not sure if there's something I'm now referencing. And so I just have to revert and hope for the best. Not anymore. It's phenomenal using that tool for the project.
Yeah, I think the first thing that will be difficult to adapt for seasoned UE4 developers is stop thinking about sublevels.
Yeah.
It's like the first instinct is like, okay, I'm going to create a sublevel for this, sublevel for that. No, don't worry about that.
Yeah.
Just put your stuff in the map. And stopping that reflex takes a few days, but they fall back to that. But with Perl partitions, you don't create sublevels,
Right.
and we don't even allow it. So
we were using data layers up front to learn how they work, and then just to generally be able to cross the board turn things off, right, to see how they impacted perf. A good example is foliage. We didn't really know how some of the bushes we were going to put in there were going to affect our performance, and so we put them on their own data layer that we can toggle at runtime, and I put it to a hotkey so we could do some fly-throughs and just do perf recordings where it just turns on, turns off, turns on, turns off, so we can kind of see how we spike and move down, and at the end we collapse those down to only the data layers we need to actually switch between the two worlds. So they can be a good organizational tool if you want to, but they don't have to be how you actually operate. And Simon, too, on that note, if I have a data layer disabled, is it like the cells? Is that stuff just not in memory anymore also? So I'm not paying for things that I don't need?
that's
at
a
a time?
good question.
Yeah, I wasn't really
I would
sure.
believe so, but I'm not sure.
Okay. I think the fact that if I come in here and I disable it in the editor, like the campfire replace one is the one that has all of the super dense geometry, we turn a bit of that off. The fact that it takes quite a bit to pull that down and turn it all off, it's not just flipping hidden flags. I'm assuming that it's stripping a lot of that out.
Pretty sure it is.
But that's the same thing too, like with wall partition. You know, because people had their kind of dividers in that space, they knew the cells that they could just not have to ever worry about until they come up to that divider. And so that means you don't have to have more resources locally to understand the context of where you're building. You just kind of take what you need, build what you need, submit what you need.
Yep. And eventually, we might add features like being able to lock a cell so that changes can't be done in those areas, or basically like checking out the level if you want.
Yeah.
So maybe in 5.0.
Yeah, super cool.
And now, we definitely don't want to forget about audio, because if we do it, then Aaron McLaren will come and let me know. Hopefully, might be in chat today as well. In UE5 Early Access, we have meta sounds, which is getting closer and closer to what one who's familiar working with DAWs might be more used to in regards to how you can sort of shape and dynamically modulate audio in real time. Whiting, would you like to go in a little bit about what meta sounds involves?
Yeah, but now I'm scared that Aaron McLaren is watching and judging everything I say.
That's the case anyway. He's going to watch this in the VOD, so just...
Hi, Aaron. No, I think that's a really good analogy. Meta Sounds is really the culmination of a lot of work that the audio team's been doing over the past few years, because, sound cues, which are kind of the old system that's been around since UE3, early UE3 eras, is, a little bit antiquated. There wasn't a lot of things you could do with them other than take a sound and then kind of modulate the volume levels on it and do some very, very simple stuff. But, over the course of the past 2 to 3 years, you've seen the new audio mixer come in. That's allowed us to kind of take some of the audio processing and put it onto other threads so that we have a little bit more headroom to do cooler things with it. And so Meta Sounds, which they're kind of making their debut in the Valley of the Ancient project, are really our attempt to kind of bring the power that you would get on the rendering side from writing something like a shader or a post process into the realm of audio. So when you look at what you can do with a meta sounds graph, it's not just change the volume of something, but you can actually do sound synthesis on there. You can play back samples on there. All the stuff that you're really used to working with in the audio side with a DAW, you can do now in the engine directly. So one of the cool parts in the video that we premiered was the sound of the Ancient's laser it's partially synthesized in game, and then it's partially has some samples overlaid on top of it. So it just really kind of opens up in the same way I think shaders did or programmable shaders and materials did for rendering. We're kind of opening up those same sort of workflows with audio. And then Quartz on top of that is a system that I think to simply put it is what it lets us talk back and forth between the audio that's playing in the background and the sound effects and the actual game world. So in the battle with the ancient golem, there, the music in the background is actually talking back and forth with gameplay, so that as the music starts to build and whatnot, the golem starts charging up and animating, and then once we get to a point in the song where it's like, now would be the perfect time for you to play that animation and start the laser charge going, we can actually call directly back into Blueprints and say, all right, go ahead, play your next animation and do the attack. So it's really opening up the door for a lot of really cool audio features that weren't possible before, and a much tighter integration between things like the Foley and the music going on and the actual gameplay systems itself. And it's I would be remiss, and Aaron would yell at me if I did not mention it was sample accurate as well. So you can get if you want to start making music games in UE5, I think now's a good time to start playing around with those systems.
And make sure you let us know and show us what you're working on, because that would be very exciting to see.
Actually, let us hear what you're working on, because it's really hard to look at audio.
I think one other thing to mention too is originally, Chance was talking about back in October, November, like which systems are we going to show in there? And we're like, okay, maybe we'll have one or two meta sounds as a sample in here. And then Dan Reynolds, who is one of our technical audio guys, was like, we're just going to do the whole thing in meta sounds. And so it was a little bit shocking and terrifying, but it's really, really cool that we actually pulled off every sound in there going through the new system. So really, really happy with what the audio team has done with that.
Yeah, one thing I thought was super cool about meta sounds is how much data you can pass in about your world. I mean, like, it's kind of a theme in general about a number of these new features, is that, like, it's not just, a bunch of content that you bring in that has minimal set of, like, kind of injection points to pass data or do things with. I mean, it's just a lot more flexibility, a lot more deep integration into other things. And yeah, the Ancient's laser attack is kind of like a really big one that's got a bunch of stuff going on in there and stuff. But you can look at numerous other meta sounds in there that do very similar things. And we're already seeing, again, in the community, people are already poking around with that and making some really, really cool things.
Yeah, and the laser example is kind of a simple one we wanted to do so it's easy to pick apart and people can see how we make it. But there's no reason that's the upper bound on complexity. You can go ham.
Yeah, and I think too, talking to Aaron, we'll get him and Dan on at some point in the future. But the widget library is going to be just a bunch more modular effects and different things you can do that you would expect in a sound library, right? And that thing will grow similar to like the Blueprint API over time. Super exciting.
Sure is. Almost too much, but the show must go on. And like Chan said, we will be covering meta sounds and quartz in details later on in July, I believe. Check out the schedule. It is, if you just scroll right below on Twitch, it is right there.
And real quick too, we said it in the script, but on meta sounds, I just want to make sure it's in there. Like, if you're not an audio designer, you don't understand audio, this is an incredible point to try it out. Just like me, I'm not an artist, but I can get around in the material editor and I can make some shaders that do something interesting in my games. Metasounds brings a lot of that same kind of power to audio generation. And so it looks very similar as if you were to hook up things like kind of ins and outs into like a stereo, right? And so if you can kind of think in those terms as far as like, node building and stuff, even if you don't understand audio or you're not, like a big audio nerd, it is an incredible tool just to go poke around with and learn from. I've had a lot of fun with it. Sorry, Victor.
There's no apologizing to be made. I mean, I even left my camera here to get my box. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit about animation. It is sort of highly featured in Valley of the Ancient demo that is available, and there are a couple of new systems here that we would like to highlight. Simon, I will leave it over to you.
Sure. So we're introducing our brand new full body IK solver, which is significantly better than our older Jacobian solver. So it's inspired by constraint solvers and rigid body simulations. It offers a much better performance, artistic control, and with a simpler interface. We also have the new motion warping framework that allows you to dynamically adjust root motion animations to adapt to dynamic or changing environments. It matches specific targets that you place in your world. You can find example of that in the demo, and you can also find example about the slope warping to adapt the flat locomotion to the rough, rugged landscape of the world. It's written entirely in control rig, and it's using the new full body IK solver. Finally, we have the blend space improvements that allows you to blend arbitrary animation graphs instead of just simple animation clips.
Yeah, awesome. FBIK is used a couple places throughout the demo. It's again a way we can pipe all kinds of meaningful data into the system and make system A and system B work really well in tandem. It keeps iteration time, like for us, it kept iteration time really nice for the battle sequence specifically. We were able to get like the results we wanted without having to go back and author a bunch of new animations. We just had one base thing that we wanted, and then we were able to kind of like really refine that and iterate on that as long as we needed to make it feel just right for the battle. Super cool. Again, these are like tools for designers like me that aren't specialists in like animation or art or audio or other things like that. Like I feel like I can go in and do something really impactful here, and I feel like I don't always need an engineer or an artist to go build new things for me to be successful, which is great. It keeps disciplines working really, really tight together too. Like there's been so many like times where it's like 2 or 3 folks will get in a room in the engine and just kind of hammer out the details of what we need to implement, and that's what we end up shipping. And FBIK is one of those things that's been really nice for that.
And we have Jeremiah Grant and a couple of the folks from his team back on the live stream in a couple of weeks to talk about these in details. If you are curious about some of the features, now maybe it's worth pointing out, and this is something that I've seen, a question that's been coming up for the last year. You can still use features in UE4 to learn the tools that will still exist in UE5. Obviously, some of them are not there. But in regards to, it comes to our learning content, if you're new to Unreal Engine and you're looking sort of for basic tutorials on how to use blueprints, for example, or just our gameplay framework, you can still learn all of those workflows, frameworks, naming conventions, etc. in UE4 and apply them in very large quantities to UE5. And so don't feel like you cannot go and search for questions and problems and tutorials in UE4 and then apply it to UE5. You will find out and see that in many cases, the user interface and the tools are very similar, except for the ones that didn't exist in UE4, of course. But we are going to cover and try to do our best to fill out documentation as well as learning samples. While I'm on that topic, Unreal Online Learning does have lessons and tutorials specifically for UE5. So if you haven't checked that out, it's learn.unrealengine.com, and you'll find it right there in the course section.
Awesome. Yeah. Whiting, let's talk about game feature plugins and how cool this is for designers and programmers working together to not make tar balls.
Yeah, game feature plugins are something that kind of came out of the learnings from making a game like Fortnite that works on such a massive scale with a massive team with a ton of gameplay programmers and designers. And it kind of fits the same role for programmers that the one file per actor and world partition does for level designers and artists, in that it's a way that you can kind of keep pockets of functionality separate from one another. So if you look at the demo, when Echo starts out, if you drop the Echo blueprint in the world, she doesn't do a whole lot other than just walk in there. But during the course of the demo, she's got 2 modes that kind of enhance her abilities. One of those is when she releases her little mote drone at the beginning that can fly around. And then once she transitions to the dark world, she can throw the light dart kind of charge projectile to blow stuff up and find the ancient at the end. And both of those features are implemented as gameplay feature plugins. So basically what that is a plugin that's self-contained, that has all the assets it needs, all the blueprint scripting it needs, and any native C++ code that it needs, that has a little descriptor file that you can open up and say, okay, when I load this plugin, I want to, stream in this content, add these components to these types of actors and whatnot. It really lets you create the scripting and functionality orthogonally to the actual blueprints itself. So if I was working on the drone mote and Chance was working on the light dart ability, we wouldn't be stepping on each other's toes necessarily. And the other nice thing about it is it means that it's more easy to transport that kind of functionality between different projects if you want to, because it's all kind of encapsulated in that module itself. So it's not the sexiest thing to show off because it's just a bunch of menus and kind of an organizational thing, but it really kind of forces us to do a lot more implementation of functionality in components that can be added to blueprints rather than in just monolithic blueprints themselves. So it's a little bit of a technological feature and a little bit of a philosophical shift at the same time.
What we found was really cool, and we'll have Michael Noland and I think Mike Beach on to talk about it later, is that we were able to pipe a lot of the functionality through the gameplay ability system, and with that, we're able to give players new gameplay abilities with a lot of this content that again doesn't exist in the core game at all. So there's like a one-way reference, right? And using the gameplay ability system, we're able to say this turns off these other things that are tagged specific ways. So the main game might manage some tags for specific things, but that allows us to make sure that if Whiting's working on something that takes these input controls and I need those, and we know that they're never going to be on at the same time, I can just make sure that whenever the game is appropriately loading this, it turns those things off. And so it's a really powerful system. It's funny, we built the drone. We pulled the drone straight out of the Kite demo, and we kind of repurposed that a little bit. We knew we wanted to explore this space with something, and we kind of wanted to see what we could do there. And so the C++ and the blueprints and the VFX and everything for that is in the hover drone plugin there. And then the actual light dart blast, energy blast she's got. We originally built that as a separate game feature plugin to just enable to give her a new ability. And then we kind of took it a little bit further, right, for our demonstration. If you see that it's called the Ancient Battle plugin now too. And not only does it turn all of that on for her, but it also adds the destructible pieces, all the targeting stuff that the actual attack needs, and it brings in the actual ancient for you to fight. So it might be like in a world where you've got a map for some time where there's this place that some future content is coming down the pipe, but it's not ready yet. It's maybe a limited time thing. You're timing this with some event in your game, and then so you kind of release this game feature into your game and you enable it whenever it's ready. And then that way, now that it's enabled, your player can do things that they couldn't before. But it's not like you had to release a whole new client build, all this other new stuff with it, right? Like it's something you can just kind of enable separately and go from there. I think we've learned a lot using this feature in Fortnite, like Nick mentioned, to kind of see how do we not build that where you have a character, somebody needs to check out the character asset. And because of that, there's like all these other things that it has to touch to resave or vice versa. If I have to save the light dart, well, since it references Echo, it thinks it needs to resave Echo. So I've got to make sure that I got to do that too. And Nick happens to have Echo checked out, and he went home for the weekend because that's what he does. So
during a pandemic, I'm always home, Chance.
That's right. Oh yeah, sorry. You went upstairs for a week for the week.
I did. I think you did touch on something else that was, folks that are cracking open the Valley of the Ancient project. The interplay of the game feature plugin and the gameplay ability system is really kind of important. And if you're used to get kind of traditional super deep blueprint code, you might see like looks like there's a lot of indirection going on now, but really that's kind of the philosophical portion of it, where we build things using gameplay abilities and gameplay tags and whatnots to keep them kind of generic at the base game level, and then we can layer that functionality on top of it, and that's how we can have a generic character at the base that has their animations extended and their abilities and their input extended, and we can make sure that if you load the hover drone ability and the battle ability at the same time, when you pull the trigger, the right thing is going to happen. It helps you kind of sort out what's going on the input stack and things like that. So those two really are important to think about in tandem, I believe.
Yeah, and it works with the input action system too, so it makes it really easy to just bind new input actions, remove new input actions from pretty much anything you want in there. Just stack components and actors in your world. It's pretty great. I'm a big fan.
I think we're at 8 pages of questions, and I will let everyone know that we are gathering them all, and thank you so much for sending them in. We will not be able to cover all of them in detail today, but we are gathering them, and we will prep all of the guests in the upcoming week to go over some of the questions that you have. But we still have some time to go, so perhaps you get lucky and we're able to catch the ones that you've been asking. A lot of good ones. Something I've seen come up over and over and over again that I think it's worth covering real quick. I'm seeing UE5 and VR and AR, and what is the state of stereo rendering and all of these new shiny features. Is there anyone on the call who would like to tackle this question?
I can. So Nanite in the early access is not supporting multi-view rendering. Is it something we'll be adding soon? So unfortunately, the shiny new feature doesn't work. Lumen works.
All right, and there is a new VR template, so you can go ahead and check that out.
Just shameless plug there, Victor.
Shameless
Yeah,
plug there.
what would you know about that, Victor?
Yeah.
No idea.
Oh, my lights came back on. That's good.
Fantastic.
I'm like the only person here, and so every once in a while,
We paid your power bill for you.
Oh, thanks, buddy. Appreciate you. Hey, I see the next thing we have on here to discuss is like with animating in the engine. We've had control rig for a bit. Simon, you want to give us TLDR of where we are there?
Sure. I mean, it's pretty awesome to think that the engine was all completely animated in engine. No external DCCs were used for that. That's pretty cool. So
Very
obviously it's all set up with control rig. Echo is also set up with control rig, so you can download the demo and play with that. So basically animating an engine, we're using sequencer and control rig. And we have a few tools like a pose library, a snapper tool, and a tween tool. With the pose library, you can create reusable poses and then apply them to your library. So you want like the end for the robot and things like that. With the control rig snapper tool, you can pin objects or controls from your control rig to other objects in the world. And it bakes keyframes over a duration of time.
Oh, that's
And,
great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And the tween tool, you can create the new in-between keyframes and weights and weight them based on the keyframe or pose that is either ahead or behind the current keyframe. And control rig also now supports encapsulation and the ability to share and reuse modular rigs via function libraries. So.
No, that's awesome. Yeah, and for you touched on it for Valley of the Ancient. You know, the Ancient is 100% animated in engine, all of it, everything he's got there, using control rig, which is just super cool. And working with Jeremiah, he showed me how some of the tools work and how it's used. And like, I've never used it before. And again, not an animator, but I feel like I can go through and do some things there that I could not do before, and at least try out ideas and whatnot using these kinds of tools without having to load a different piece of software, which I don't have a license for nor how to use. So
Control rigs really make it easy to animate and play around with the character. And if you had the IK on there, and it's very powerful.
Yeah, the FBIK node is basically a control rig node, right? That you can pass all your data into. Yeah, super powerful, man. Great stuff. Wanted to call out to that's kind of the high level number of or I guess a high level list of features that were UE5 specific that we wanted to make sure showcase well in Topaz. I'm sorry, in Valley of the Ancient. That's Valley 5 now. And I just wanted to also call out too that there's a number of UE4 features that we use that have really good representation in the project as well. So if you are new to UE, or if you want to see how some of these things were done, there's some good examples of other things in there. Like, why do you want to talk a little bit about destruction?
Yeah, with the destruction that's in the demo plugin, we wanted to have a few pieces, and it was really important to us to kind of put it through its paces running on console in terms of performance and memory, because I mean it's doing destruction that has nanite assets within it for the destruction bit, so that they actually match the environment. So there was a lot of time and a lot of hard work, both by the content side of the team and the simulation team, getting that up to speed. I think we went from gigabytes of memory in use on the console to have those pieces in there to much less memory that properly streams in and out. So that was, I think, a huge behind the scenes piece that I think we'll be seeing more and more of as UE5 becomes more mature, now that it's kind of up to snuff on consoles.
And a really cool way to take a look at that too is if you load up the Dark World, you can open up the robots, the Ancients sequence for emergence, and you can kind of scrub through it and watch all the individual caches break and whatnot, and take a look at the assets specifically from there. Some really great examples in there. Same thing with Niagara. I mean, on the Ancient, who's got the big old spinning, red volumetrics in his head there. That Ryan Brooks put together for us, which is super great, as well as the fire. Right, there's some really great things in there. I haven't spent enough time with Niagara yet, and it's the first place I'm going to dive in just to kind of see how we made some of those things work. As mentioned before, a gameplay ability system is kind of peppered throughout pretty much anything we could get it onto for Echo. So I've seen a number of questions kind of scroll through chat about it. If you're interested in learning it, we've got some really good docs in it from UE4, and you can see it in use with these other gameplay systems that we've got. And of course, too, blueprints are still here, and we use them for pretty much everything in here. So if you're used to digging around in there and want to see how any of this is set up, the Ancient is one big Ancient. One big blueprint called, I think, BP Ancient. So you can find that pretty easy too.
And a bunch of gameplay ability blueprints. I saw in the chat they were saying how does Echo play different animations and stuff.
Yep.
If she doesn't have them in the base game, if you look at how the gameplay ability blueprints are set up in there, that's how we do it.
Yeah, I think there's like the dodge is one, the walk overrides one, the
mantling is one,
light dart one, the vault, the mantling,
the
is
touching
one.
of the Dark Rift.
That's the interact with that. That's right. We tried to go ham.
We went totally ham.
Yeah, I was gonna say a lot of areas, not
Yes.
only animation.
Yes.
It's a very ham-rich project.
Yes. I know. So we've kind of talked about a number of these features that are well represented in the project in different areas. I'm sure there's a handful of other things that are in UE5 that might not be here. Is there anything? Just want to make sure if there's anything we haven't covered, we can before we move on to kind of what's next.
Let's see. Still gathering questions. I don't even know what page I'm on right now.
It's all good. I just didn't know if there's anything that's like, oh yeah, we didn't have the appropriate time to kind of highlight it here or actually use it.
We're doing good on time. We have gone through a whole bunch of it, so I think we can just continue, and then we'll have a good amount of time for questions.
Yeah, sounds good. So Nick Penwarden, I have to specify because we have so many Nicks. What's the road to 5.0 look like? Are we going to do hot fixes? Any supplemental releases between now and then? Kind of what can developers expect?
So the road to 5.0, we are looking at putting out a hotfix for early access. What we want to do is gather up crash reports, feedback, stuff like that. Focus on getting stability up in early access a little bit, and seeing what iterative improvements we can make over the next couple of weeks, maybe next month. And then our focus is going to turn towards the 5.0 release itself. So that's all going to be on taking the features that are in early access, continuing to improve workflows, continuing to we'll have a really big push on polish, on optimization, on stability, to really get those buttoned up and ready to use in production to make games. The other step that we have in the future is we're going to be shipping Fortnite on top of UE5. So that technology change is really our goal with that is to use it as a proof point. Like UE5 is ready. You can ship a game on UE5 because we are shipping our own games on it. So that will give us a first nice proof point of shipping Fortnite on it, and then we'll get it all out to you.
Awesome. Anything in particular from the engineering directors here, specifically for kind of what's next on the way to 5.0? Anything you think you feel we can talk about that's going to maybe land at that time? And there's a handful of things that we've kind of mentioned in the past, but just anything that's not already covered.
I think I can add a bit more. We're obviously polishing and making the features easier to use. Specifically to call out, I think Lumen and the extending of the hardware ray tracing support is something we are still aiming for 5.0. I think it's going to be a great alternative for people. It hasn't been mentioned, but we are working on making platforms, the non-Windows platforms, easier to work with, easier to iterate on. So that's a whole effort we're pushing forward. And things like Vulkan ray tracing might come. We are working on optimizing the render and so on and so on.
Right on.
I'll throw out that the MetaSounds workflow is they're working on just making it way more feature rich right now and adding more visualizers and nice kind of debugging and workflow sorts of things to really help you implement MetaSounds and help people get up to speed with how to use them. So I know they're very keen to see what people are doing with them publicly, and that would probably affect with which kinds of features that they're adding to it, based on what demand is. So post your stuff, send it to Aaron and to Unreal Engine on Twitter, and I'm sure Victor can help us aggregate.
I was going to say, Aaron McLaren, Dan Reynolds at Unreal Engine. Those are the three that you want to ping. Adam Block too, actually.
Yeah, and on that note too, it's funny working with MetaSounds. It's very reminiscent, and Whiting, you might be able to speak to this, of like Blueprints at 4.0, right? Where there's really great functionality in there, and there's a lot of really cool little things that have been added to Blueprints over time that I think that they want to bring in there too, like reroute nodes, for instance, and things like that, to really make it nice and clean and neat. And yeah.
Yeah, blueprints were basically a result of a lot of people walking over behind Nick Donaldson's desk and seeing what crazy stuff he got up to, and then making features to help keep him happy. So I think the same thing will happen with MetaSounds, where it's really based on what people are trying to do with it is where we spend our time.
Cool. Are y'all ready to tackle some of the questions that we received during the last hour and 17 minutes?
Yeah, let's
I want to hear
Q&A.
Great, yes, yeah, let's do it.
It looks like there's one or two, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. People have questions. Let's kick off with one question that came in rather recently from A. Soroka. Is the preview going to be updated throughout 2021 until the full release, or is this the only version we have access to until 5.0?
Yeah, I can cover that. I mentioned briefly we are going to look at getting a hotfix out. Maybe one or two, trying to similar to preview builds as we release them before UE4 releases, looking to get stability up, looking to fix the very common problems that people are running into. But after that, the next release will be 5.0.
And you can follow us on GitHub as well, if that wasn't mentioned. I was reading questions.
Yeah, I actually sent a tweet out about that earlier too. Main is on GitHub too. It's really cool. I don't know how many people had recognized that, but we have not just early access build, but if you really want to go like into the depths of the dragons and fight them with us, you can live on the absolute edge with Main as well.
Yep, follow along as check-ins go into UE5. You can see it all live.
I put a tweet up and I was like, I wonder what the last check-in was, and it was like an hour ago. I was like, okay, yeah, it's getting updated. So pretty cool.
Next question comes from Loresh, who's wondering, what's the roadmap for tessellation replacements for things that Nanite does not support?
So we have we are working on a knowledge base article that will cover this in detail, but we intend to replace the tessellation with support within Nanite. It's still some work to come. I unfortunately cannot go and say we have a roadmap for, because it's a bit of an R&D, it's a bit of exploration there as well. So yeah, it is something on our mind and something we are working towards.
Next question comes from Chickenweed. Oh, go ahead, Chance.
Oh no, it's fine. I'm tracking you in the doc, so following.
Oh. Next question comes from Chickenweed, who's wondering, will Nanite support transparent and animated meshes in the future?
Absolutely, yes. That's our goal. We want to make sure that every part of the pipeline that deals with meshes will be supported with Nanite. So we are looking at translucencies, at animation. We would like to get, as I said, tessellation, displacement working.
Yeah, I remember another question a little down further below. Don't remember who asked it, but someone was curious. Oh, here we go. From Runcont, who's wondering, why did you implement your own rasterizer?
I think this will be best in detail answered by Brian in the next live stream. It's a very passionate subject for him, but I think the short answer is because it enabled us to make Nanite. It's somewhere where we were able to move much further forward than anybody else.
Yeah, I mean, 2 words, it's faster. But Brian can expand on that in more detail.
Tune in next week, same time as today, same channel. We'll have Brian Karish. Cool.
We got one here from Alvaro Real Time Mayhem. I noticed the game ability system was used in the demo project. Does this mean we should expect newer updates to it? Whiting, do you know the future of GAS?
Yeah, gameplay ability is something that kind of got incubated on Paragon and Fortnite, and then this is really Valley of the Ancient, because we were using the game feature plugins, was really the first time we were trying to productize it in the engine. But we've got some efforts spinning up right now that'll come out around the 5.0 launch that will really kind of put it through its paces and make some more complicated examples. And based on the learnings, we will definitely be updating that.
I can grab this one right here. Are there any plans? This is from THC _Ilya. Are there any plans for a tutorial series for Unreal Engine 5? I think just kind of as we move forward, you should expect everything that, same behaviors we had around UE4 throughout its life cycle. So that's not just a continued support release over release with new features and functionality, but that comes along with, us being able to put out resources for pretty much anything that we build and add to the engine. So yeah, I would say it's pretty safe to say so. And then another one from NTS. How often do you plan to release updates and fixes to the release? I think we already discussed kind of what we're going to do for early access and kind of between now and 5.0, but Nick Penwar, this is an assumption. I assume it'd be very similar to what people expect from UE4 as well.
Oh, sorry. Say that again.
No, all good. That's good.
Cut out for a second.
You were texting like me earlier. That's totally fine. No, I'm just kidding. How often do we plan to release updates and fixes to release? I know we talked about early access to 5.0, but I'm assuming that 5.0 going forward is going to be very similar to what people can expect with UE4 now. We're just going to kind of continue that trend as we move forward.
Yep. Yeah, that's the plan right now. Is once 5.0 gets out there, we'll be releasing frequent updates throughout each year. So yeah, expect a release cadence similar to UE4.
In regards to Nanite and sort of this new workflow, we're going to go back to this. I know Brian Cares is coming on, but there are a lot of questions, and I think this one is worth covering. When you now import movie quality assets to the editor, you are left with files that are very large compared to the traditional sort of much lower poly workflow. What are we doing to make this workflow sort of normal and easier to work with?
So there are a bunch of technologies underneath the surface. I don't know if people tried it, but if you try to take a big mesh and turn it into Nanite, you actually notice that it's much smaller than the original mesh. We have really good compression underneath the surface. We're still working on improving it. We're looking at how we can make the assets smaller by obviously not distributing things you actually do not need to distribute. So it's a work in progress, but I think it's worth pointing out that the Nanite meshes, because of what our rasterization allows us, are so compressed compared to the traditionals that you are probably actually saving space.
I would add on Valley of the Ancient too. The bigger offender in terms of disk size was the texture stores, because you need so many high-res textures to fill things up. But we did squeak in storing the original assets as JPEGs, because a lot of the photo scanned assets from Quixel were JPEGs anyway. There's no need to store them lossless as the raw data assets. So that's a feature that made it into early access and saved us a ton of disk space. I probably shouldn't say it, but a month and a half ago, we were at 320 gigs for the project before we cleaned everything up and compressed it. But that does show you the JPEG compression was a huge portion of that too.
And goes to show how much texture was a part of that.
Yes. Sorry. On that note, on Valley of the Ancient, if you look through the content, I think it's something like 90% of our content is that folder, right? It's the Megascans folder, and we were able to delete I don't know how many normal maps, right? To cut all that out too. So we're using fewer textures in general. We probably could have been a little bit more deliberate over time to pick the actual resolution of each of these textures that we actually need for specific spots. And we also have a very broad array of different objects that are in there. So there's very many different unique meshes that require unique textures as well too. So probably some optimization to be saved there as well.
The last thing I'll say on that is if you check out the Nanite documentation, there's a pretty good analysis there of disk footprint and memory size of a Nanite mesh versus a traditional static mesh. As well as some thinking about what textures you need and how that potentially impacts size. And so it's a good place to go to get an idea of what you can expect using film quality assets in your game, how it will affect disk footprint for your project.
And I think it's worth everybody hounding the Quixel guys when they come on the stream, but they already have a lot of learnings based on what they did here, and they think they can get away with using a lot fewer textures and more detailed textures that are reused all around at higher resolutions to really chop down the footprint that we just didn't have time for on this project. So it'll get a lot better, and we'll have a lot more best practices in the future.
And that goes back to the Valley of the Ancient being an experiment for us. This is right. This was us learning how to try to build this type of content. And with what we know now, I think we'd build the environment a bit differently, and we'd be able to do it more optimally and achieve the same results. So I think it was an awesome project for us to get an idea of how to build content with this tech. And as we learn more and more, we'll want to share that with you all. And as you explore the tech and have learnings, please share it back with us.
Exactly what I was going to say. Yeah.
Go ahead, Chance.
No, I'm just saying that was exactly what I was going to say. There's so much that we learned through the process here that we hope to be able to share.
And something that I didn't actually know before we released it, but some folks in the community packaged the demo, and it turns out that the package build is 25 gigabytes, which is quite the change from the size of the project itself. And so add, everything that comes with sort of optimizing and performance is usually what comes, after the tools have been built. And so there's a lot to come there. I hope everyone's excited to participate in it. Made on GitHub. Be vigilant. And
it's also worth pointing out, one of the reasons for that size difference is that when you download the project, you will get both the original source assets, so like the source JPEGs for all the textures, the raw source triangles for all the geometry, as well as the optimized versions. That way, your first experience opening the project isn't processing all of that data, and so you're effectively downloading what's in that final package, what you would ship to players once you've made your game or experience, as well as the source assets themselves. So it's all of that is encompassed in that initial download.
On that note, there've been a few questions in regards to hardware and what kind of computer do I need to work with Unreal Engine? What kind of computer do I might need in the future to play Unreal Engine games? I think we can touch a little bit on the difference between Valley of the Ancient and Unreal Engine 5 in general when it comes to the plethora and range of hardware that exists out there.
Yeah, I guess I can speak to that. So with Valley of the Ancient, we were really targeting how do we push the limits of the technology that we built for on the high end for next generation consoles. So we were targeting next generation console hardware with this demo, and we really built all of the content with that in mind. So the short answer of what hardware do you need to develop with UE5 is depends what type of content you're wanting to build and how you want to build it. When you want to build a game that's going to, say, scale across console generations, you can still take advantage of Nanite and take advantage of its capability to render extremely high polygon meshes, and you just need to build your game content with the idea that, hey, I'm going to scale across platforms. When we were getting Fortnite, which was originally made for consoles, running on mobile, part of that effort was figuring out how do we scale down and substantially, or how do we take that content and scale it down to run on mobile phone hardware. And so it's kind of the same idea when you're going to approach this is really how do you approach building your content by thinking about all of the platforms that you're going to want to ship it on, and then take advantage of how you can scale up and down that content on different platforms to optimize the final results for it.
And then I would even say, and we've been working with Val and the Ancient, I mean, the game development is a series of those kinds of compromises. You choose where to spend that budget based on, right? Like what you think is most precious to you in your game, whether it's frame rate or visuals or reflections, right? And so you might spend, some points in bucket A and not B. So a lot of it comes down to being content specific.
Thank you both. All of you. Thanks to all of you. Without you, we would not be here, and there would not be a UE5 available right now. Putting that out there. Moving on.
And the entire development team. We're just a couple of people who help make this, but
when I'm saying you, I guess it's just all of you developers out there. There are more, believe it or not. This is not the only folks who worked on the.
I'm just the guy they asked to talk.
It's the royal
Same here,
you.
just the face. Like I know all the intricacies in UE5 yet. Trust me, I've not had nearly as much time working with the tools. I see all of you out there working with it, and I'm getting a little bit jealous because we're in the weeds with everything that's involved around community and preparing all this for you. But eventually, we'll all get there. It's a journey that we're all traveling together. Next question comes from ODZO, who's asking, will there be other sample projects released? Valley of the Ancient is good as a complete sample, but it's quite overwhelming to jump straight into it. Other sample projects that are less complex would be good for me.
Funny that Pinward and I were literally discussing this, I think, 4 days ago, right? Like, and kind of what the plan is next. We don't have anything really to share at this point, but we do recognize that there are numerous ways that we can provide value to folks. It's not, a high-end example project. There are plans for 5.0 for a number of the different various ways that you would get access to examples, such as content examples, or other sample projects in the works that are on their way. So stay tuned for more information there, but it is something that we're discussing in the shorter term too.
And I would say that we can probably expect a lot of content to come out from the community. I've had several requests from folks, tutorial creators around the world, who is wondering if they're allowed to start creating content with UE5, and they are. There is the same end-user license agreement applies to UE5 as it applies to Unreal Engine 4. So go ahead, produce content, make all the crazy things, and we'd love to see it. Next questions come from JB, who's wondering, how easily do plugins transfer over from UE4 to UE5? Should we expect to see some plugins updated to support UE5 soon?
This could be multifaceted. I think maybe it needs a little bit more info, but so there's UE4 engine plugins that are in UE5. There may be some that made the jump and maybe some that we plan not to. Other plugins to be updated to support UE5. That might be things on like Marketplace or whatnot. Nick, are there, Pinwarden, are there things that are in UE4 right now, like plugins or systems that we know that we haven't yet ported up to UE5 yet?
Well, so everything that we ship with UE4 is available as part of UE5. Marketplace plugins are different. So individual plugin developers are going to have to take the time to update their plugins for UE5. One of the it's another thing that I've noticed as I've been trying to see how developers are working with UE5, and a number of plugin developers are noticing that they were very easily able to get their plugins up and running in UE5. So I hope more and more plugin developers have that kind of experience where it's more or less easy to get them translated over. Depending on the specific plugin, it may be easier or more difficult to get it running in UE5. But similar to getting projects in, I mean, the goal is that upgrading shouldn't be that much more difficult than updating for a new UE4 release.
Cool.
The next question comes from Polter, who's wondering, what are your plans for the water plugin? Will there be any changes in Unreal Engine 5?
Yes, for 5.0, we want to make the water plugin production ready. Right now, it's still, I don't remember if it's experimental or beta, but it's not production ready yet. One part that is missing is the making water work with the world partition. So splitting the water across the grid. So that's in the works. Yeah, just quality of life improvements. And another thing that we want to tackle is the brush limitation, which right now the brush is for the whole map. So if the map gets too big, then we run out. The brush basically makes the engine crash. So we want to have a better approach for that, so that we can scale to much larger worlds.
Thank you, Simon. Next question comes from Richard Sun, who's wondering, is there an established pipeline to convert UE4 lit scenes to convert towards and to support Lumen?
That might be a better question for Daniel, who will be, I think, live in 2 weeks.
That's right.
Right? 2 weeks. But right now, I think I'd summarize it the way I read it. Somebody tweet about it. You go in, you disable light maps, you turn on Lumen, and it looks awesome. I mean, haven't tried it, but people tweet about it that way, so.
Yeah, it's just a drop down in the project settings, right, at this point? Yeah.
Correct.
It's enabled by default in all new projects, which if you are using the VR template, you actually do have to disable Lumen, because otherwise the lighting that's baked there does not display it in the correct way. This will be fixed this will be hotfixed in the future. Some special template shenanigans that had to be done to make that work when you create a new project that is default, and it shouldn't be in that project. Just a note. Next question comes from Matteo Merchant Lopera, who is wondering, can it be possible to produce a full video game only with blueprints in Unreal Engine 5?
I would say as much as possible as it was in UE4. I mean, there might be some rough edges if you have to cert on console potentially, but we've had people ship games that are blueprint only. So there's no kind of fundamental limitation to it. We tried to use as much blueprints as possible in Valley of the Ancient just to show it could be done. And I always harp on this example, but Robo Recall, which I noticed, Victor, you are repping back there, was about like 85% blueprints, right? There's no limit on performance and whatnot as long as you are diligent about what you do and write good code in blueprints the same as you would write good code in native code. There's ways to get around it. So I don't think there's any fundamental limitations for it. And if there are, we should fix that. So let us know.
You know, working with folks over the UE4 life cycle, there's numerous games that launched on Steam, right, or other PC stores that are blueprints only. Typically, Whiting calls it console. Generally, the native aspects there are operating with SDKs mostly, right? Things that the hardware itself kind of needs that native layer for you to attach to. But yeah.
Moving on to the next question comes from Shadow I Mai, who's wondering, how big can you make maps now?
Big.
Well, the limitation comes from the the floating point precision, right? So 10 kilometer by 10 kilometer, you're going to be fine. Basically, if you move away from more than 5.2 kilometer from the origin, you start getting to lower precision world. You can have a 16 by 16 kilometer world if you want, and if the outer rims are more like fake meshes that you don't have gameplay, that you can't navigate in that area. So 16 by 16 would work. But yeah, 10 by 10 if you want to have a gameplay.
Yeah, and on that note too, what we shipped in Valley of the Ancient, we did kind of 2 by 2 as the place that we focused on, but we had artists kind of hand dressing a lot of that, over a dozen weeks or so. With more people and more time, we could have done the same thing and gone much larger, even with that process there, because of streaming systems like World Partition. Being able to get what we don't need out of memory and what we do back in. Wasn't a limitation of the tech at that point. It was for us. It was just limitation of the schedule.
Next question comes from Simon Finney, who's wondering, how important is fast access memory, such as in the PlayStation 5 solid-state drive, for performance with this Unreal Engine 5 technology?
It certainly helps. Whether you're streaming in content for levels or streaming in geometry with Nanite, streaming in textures with virtual texturing, the more I/O bandwidth we have, the more that you'll be able to stream in that detail without noticing the difference. However, the technology does scale surprisingly well. I actually have Valley of the Ancient on a spinning disk hard drive, and I've been playing around with it a little bit, and it actually works surprisingly well.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that virtual textures and Nanite, for example, they're much more gentle when it comes to the amount of streaming. It's not these like you move and then you get megabytes and megabytes of data suddenly in one frame. It's much more continuous, much more fine grained. So actually, yeah, it's working pretty well on all kinds of I/O.
Next question comes from Biotorial, who's wondering, are landscapes planned to be supported by Nanite?
They're planned to be supported by Lumen. That was my answer.
I think Brian will have opinions on that.
Yeah, Brian will have an opinion on that, but yeah, it's certainly working on the demo. We were looking at all the different ways we could shape this technology. So it's one of the things we need to take into account as an experience coming from this demo.
Yeah, currently the virtual height field work would be the way to scale up geometric complexity on the terrain, but we're exploring all sorts of options for the future.
Next question comes from Ryan Van Meter, and even though this question is specific, I think we can answer it a little bit generically. The question is multi-user editing functional or planned? I'd like to start prototyping with a friend, and it would be cool if this UE4 feature made it into this early access demo. Other than the clear deprecated features that is listed in our documentation, unless it's there, these features will be made available in UE5. If they're not currently working, they will be in the future. And so if you're curious what sort of was in UE4 and what will be in UE5, go ahead and head over to our documentation where you can see the entire list of features that have been removed. And if any of you know specifically about multi-user editing in UE5, feel free to chime in, but I have not yet tried that.
Yeah, I have not tried it either, but as far as I know, it should be working.
Chance you need to pay your power bill again.
I know.
Yeah, I don't know what's up there.
You need to have like a ceiling fan or something around here, always moving.
Let's see. Next question comes from A. Sorovka, another Nanite question. Vertex painting on instant Nanite meshes coming at some point?
Yes, although I'm not sure if we will call it vertex painting at that point. Nanite meshes are huge in terms of the amount of polygons and vertices you can make. So So we are not yet sure if what we will be doing soon is going to be precise vertex painting or something more volumetric. We made some experiments over last year and that looked very good. So now we need to wrap it up and productize it. So yes, it's something we actually are working on.
Next question comes from MOA Development, who's wondering, are there limitations to the density of meshes when importing?
Not really. We had meshes that were tens of millions of polygons. So, I mean, at some point people can run out of memory somewhere. I would encourage everybody to report the cases where this doesn't work.
The user did note that they have noticed crashes when trying over 5 million triangles.
That's unusual. It would be great to have that mesh and test it out here to see what's going on.
MOA Development, you know where to find us. Send us your crash log. Next question comes from Hancour. Let's see. Hancour is wondering, are Marketplace C++ plugins able to publish to wait until release? For now, we have no news in regards to Marketplace support, but stay up to date on our Twitter account as well as the forum thread, and we will update you. Right now, UE5 is in early access. It's meant to be played around with and experimented with. But feel free to prepare your plugins, make sure that they work, and there's no limitations for you to not be able to distribute them elsewhere.
I've got one here, Victor, that I'd like to see Pinboard can answer. What is the plan for future updates to UE4 for now?
Yeah, I can talk about that. So we've got we will be releasing 427 later this year. And currently that is the last planned release that we have for UE4. We'll play that by ear a little bit if there's a good reason for releasing a small update to UE4, say for like SDK updates or something like that. That's something that we'll consider. But our plan is to jump right from 427 to 5.0.
Yeah, and also on that note, if you still are on 4.0 and you don't want to move to UE5 or 4.27, and you don't want to move to UE5, since the source is available, which it'll remain available, if you need to do SDK updates or things to support live games that are already shipped there, that'll option will be available to you going forward as well. Right.
Next question comes from Sonali Singh, who's wondering if the control rig sample project is available in UE 5.0. And I believe this is a reference to the live stream we did with Jeremiah Grant. And we weren't able to say this after the stream. I know we did mention that we were going to provide the slope warping example project, and the reason why we couldn't do that is because that was being developed for the UE5 early access release, and so the Valley of the Ancient demo actually contains a much better version of the slope warping example. So that is essentially the example project for slope warping and was it motion warping now? Am I saying that right?
FBIK handles the slope warping, and motion warping is for the root motion animations that are driving those.
Next question comes from Emo Milo 1213, who is, and I've seen this a couple of questions in regards to this. They're a little bit confused on the deprecated tag on ray trace reflections, etc. Assume that hardware ray tracing would run faster than software. Is there some hidden toggle to use RTX in Nanite? Could we go into details a little bit what is going on there?
Oh, yeah, that's probably didn't come out right. The reason why it's marked as deprecated is because Lumen is taking over that part of the pipeline. You can use it still, the optimized reflections that are coming from UE4, but Lumen is integrating a better version of it. So as we work on the hardware ray tracing support and extending it, it will fully replace the exclusive reflections part.
Yeah, and maybe a different way to think about it is that Lumen is kind of a system that is combining a number of technologies to provide indirect lighting of all forms, whether it's GI via indirect diffuse or reflections, indirect specular. And so the basically hardware ray tracing is a component or a tool that Lumen has that it can use for the purpose of reflection. So hardware ray tracing is still alive and well for reflections in UE5 with Lumen, and will continue to be. But that's that's the path forward. Basically, ray tracing will be integrated into Lumen.
Thank you all. I know that a couple of you have some important things to deal with right around soon-ish, and so I wanted to give all of you the opportunity. Before we end the stream here, I wanted to make sure that if there's anything else you thought of that you wanted to bring up for our audience here today, and then I'm going to move over to our little outro. Dave said everything they want. Go ahead, Chance.
Yeah, of course I have something to say. No, the only thing I have to say is thanks for coming along on the ride with us, community. We're really excited. We want you to let us know what you think. Download the tools, poke around. We've seen some really amazing photographs come across social or across the forums and whatnot, and videos. As always, you're doing incredible work out there with our tools, and so we really like that. So continue to give us feedback as you always do. We're all really stoked about this next generation. This is just the start. We have a ways to go ahead of us, but we're all excited, and we're really excited to have you here with us.
Yeah, I'll just echo that. The early access release is the culmination of a lot of hard work that the development team have been putting into getting UE5 ready, and so seeing all of the really cool projects that you all are working on is really inspirational for the team, and really looking forward to what else you all create with it.
That's right. And then also shout out to all the UE engineers and all the folks that have been working on making this possible. It's been a pretty massive effort to get here, and it's just been really amazing seeing it come together.
And all the Slack threads we have going on with all the people posting links of all the cool stuff that's being done. I've seen the infinite dog quite a bit, and a bunch of the rebuilding elemental with Lumen and stuff like that. That's the stuff that keeps everybody going and inspired. So please post stuff, especially silly stuff. That's my personal favorite. More infinite dogs in Nanite.
Yeah. Volumetric dog, if we can get it in there.
Yeah, if we can get volumetric dogs, we'll know we've made it.
Right. And then also too, I wanted to mention, I'm sure that Victor will probably, ring us in with this, but there's a ton of questions we didn't get to here, but we'll be taking these out and parting them out for a lot of the future live streams we have that are a little bit more contextual on specific topics. And so we'll try to get to everything we can on those as well.
On that note, for each of the live streams that we do every week, not just in regards to Unreal Engine 5, we post the forum announcement post a week or two prior to the stream itself, and that is a great place to go and ask your questions before the stream. Now, we have gathered all of the ones from today, and so we will try to the best of our ability to prep our future guests with these questions. However, if you didn't get a chance to ask them and you're watching this, the VOD on YouTube or Twitch afterwards, when those posts go live in the forums, head over there, ask your questions, and give us as many opportunities as possible to answer the questions that you have. Because occasionally, they might require a little bit more thought than something that you can do on the spot. And that's the best place to go for that. Of course, you can always spin up other threads on the forum as well, but this is a special opportunity that you have to specifically prepare the guest who's coming live for us on that day, and then tune in. That said, all of our live streams are available on YouTube and Twitch immediately after we go offline. You can find the entire Inside Unreal YouTube playlist available right below on Twitch. If you're on YouTube, it should be right there already. If you started watching us today and you are new to the world of Unreal Engine, go to www.unrealengine.com. Actually, you don't even need a www. Maybe on some platforms you still do. I don't know. But unrealengine.com is where you can download the Epic Games Launcher. And from there, you can download Unreal Engine, whether that's 4.26, 27, or .0. Actually, I thought it was kind of funny when Chance mentioned 4.0. If you're still on 4.0, you should probably upgrade at this point. That would be my recommendation. No, Chance says no.
No, it still runs.
It still runs, yes. Yeah. Anyway, going off tangents here. that's where you can find Unreal Engine. There is learn.unrealengine.com, where you can find over 90 courses produced from professionals in the industry on how to use Unreal Engine, and you can learn everything from lighting to animation. And like I mentioned previously, these skills will transfer over to Unreal Engine 4, just like your projects will. So if you'd like to learn, there's no better time than to start right now. We do transcribe all of our live streams on the channel. That script usually is made available about a week after we go live. It does contain timestamps, and so if there was anything in particular in the stream that you don't remember when we talked about, but that you want to dig into, you can download that transcript or just turn on captions for YouTube, which is the ultimate and best reason for them. And you can find that, Control F, and you can find that timestamp in the video. We do timestamp all the videos on YouTube as well. Honestly, the best place to watch the VOD is probably on YouTube because of that. There are there are communities around the world that are still throwing virtual meetups, even though we are not seeing each other in person yet, as the pandemic is still raging strong. Communities.unrealengine.com is the place where you can find groups of people in your local area to get together with. Some of them are still throwing virtual meetups around the world, and that's a good place to find other like-minded people who are working with Unreal Engine, whether that's games, virtual production, media, architecture, you name it, they are all over the world. If you can't find a group, there's a button to become a leader. Fill out that form, get in touch with us if that's something you're interested in, and we will get back to you. Make sure you visit our forums. There's also our unofficial Discord channel, unrealslackers.org. They just spun up last-minute UE5 channels there last night, so if you have those questions, you can head over there. There's also the new category on the forums where you can head over and ask your questions. We'd love to see what you're working on and get all your feedback so that we can make UE5 the best engine there can be. We're still looking for new countdown videos. If you have them, go ahead and shoot them to community@unrealengine.com. This is 5 minutes of development, whether that's sped up, whether it's real time. You be our guest and fill that out. We'd love to see all the stuff you're working on. Make sure you follow us on social media, and if you stream on Twitch, make sure you use the Unreal Engine category. You can combine that with either creative or game development. They're both good and allows us to find the stuff that you're working on. We try to come in and hang out with you as often as we can. Notification bell on YouTube, and now I'm about to be done with my outro. Next week we have Nanite going on with Brian Karras, Galen Davis, and Chance Ivy on the stream. I hope you all are excited for that as I am. And with that, I would like to give our special thanks, and please chat, give it up for our guests today, for all of the time they gave us, the knowledge, and also all the work that they've done and will be doing in the future. Thank you all. Now I want to see chat just go crazy. Okay, there we go. That's a little bit better.
It's silent applause, but we can watch it. It's like watching audio, like we talked about earlier. Thank you all for making the time, engineering folks, for this. This is super awesome. Really excited about UE5 and where we take it from here.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you all. With that said, it's time to say goodbye. We'll see you all next week. Let's roll the outro. Take care, everyone.